We're honoring Veterans Day here at the CyberWire with 15% off annual subscriptions of CyberWire Pro by using code VET2022, all one word. That's VET2022. Veterans and service members can reach out to us directly at support@thecyberwire.com for an additional discount. We also dropped a special Veterans Day episode of CSO Perspectives, that's my podcast, that you'll get access to with your subscription, along with exclusive briefings, articles, and events. Visit thecyberwire.com/pro to redeem this offer by November 18th.
This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by Collide. Traditional security tools force you to treat your workforce like bad actors, but that's not the only option. Collide is endpoint security that knows that employees aren't your biggest risk, they're your biggest allies. Collide works by notifying your employees of security issues via Slack and giving them step-by-step instructions to resolve them. Collide is built for teams that Slack, and it works across Mac, Linux, and Windows devices. You can meet your security goals without compromising your values. Visit collide.com/cyberwiredaily to find out how. A look at software supply chain risks and cyber risk across sectors. CISA releases stakeholder-specific vulnerability categorization. Sandworm is back in Russia's hybrid war, another wiper campaign from a Russian cyber auxiliary. Malek Ben Salem from Accenture has thoughts on future-proofing cloud security. Rick Howard previews the latest CSO Perspectives. And the Australian Federal Police say they know who hacked Medibank. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Monday, November 14th, 2022. Reuters reports that thousands of smartphone applications in Apple and Google's online stores contain computer code developed by a technology company, Pushwoosh. A number of users, among them the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, thought that Pushwoosh was based in Washington, when in fact its operations are centered in Russia. CDC has now removed the software from 7 of its apps. The software also appeared in at least one mobile app used in the U.S. Army. The Army removed it this past spring. Reuters says there's no evidence that Pushwoosh collected or reported sensitive data to the Russian government, but as a Russian company, it's obligated by law to cooperate with the authorities on demand. Pushwoosh's founder denies the company misrepresented itself as being anything other than a Russian business. So it's an a priori risk, but the story is interesting insofar as it suggests the complexity of software supply chains and the difficulty in ensuring their security. Moodys this morning published a look at cyber risk across various sectors. While most sectors are seeing trends toward decentralization, more remote access, and of course, further digitization of their operations, not all are equally exposed. The report states, critical infrastructure sectors like electric, water, and other utilities have the highest risk exposure and a growing reliance on digitization, but make up only a small share, about 3.5% of overall rated debt. That risk doesn't mean these sectors are relatively poorly protected, but rather that the consequences of a successful attack could be severe and widespread. The report concludes, as of now, the sectors facing the lowest threat exposure happen to be the least digitized: coal mining, construction, oil field services, and paper and forest products. And as organizations in recent years have accelerated their move to digitized processes, information systems, and networks, that transformation potentially leaves a door open for opportunistic hackers. Last Thursday, before the U.S. Veterans Day holiday, The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency released a Guide to the Stakeholder-Specific Vulnerability Categorization, the SSVC, which it describes as a vulnerability management methodology that assesses vulnerabilities and prioritizes remediation efforts based on exploitation status, impacts to safety, and prevalence of the affected product in a singular system. The SSVC is expected to provide important context organizations can use for vulnerability management. Eric Goldstein, Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at CISA, outlined the agency's goals in establishing the SSVC. It fits into CISA's three-part approach to improving vulnerability management, Goldstein explained. First, we must introduce greater automation into vulnerability management, including by expanding use of the Common Security Advisory Framework. Second, we must make it easier for organizations to understand whether a given product is impacted by a vulnerability through widespread adoption of vulnerability exploitability exchange. Third, we must help organizations more effectively prioritize vulnerability management resources through the use of stakeholder-specific vulnerability categorization, including prioritizing vulnerabilities on CISA's Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. CISA will assess vulnerabilities and assign them one of four actions. For the least severe, the agency will track them and would recommend remediating them within standard timelines. Up one level in severity is what CISA calls track, when track has an asterisk after it. In these cases, CISA monitors the vulnerability more closely for possible changes, but still recommends remediation within standard timelines. The second most worrisome class of vulnerabilities is assigned to the attend category. These require attention from an organization's leaders, who should request assistance or further information, and the vulnerabilities should be remediated sooner than standard update timelines. And finally, the most severe vulnerabilities are assigned to the act category. These vulnerabilities require even more extensive coordination and leadership involvement, and they should be remediated as soon as possible. CISA has invited public input. If you have comments, observations, or recommendations concerning SSVC, they'd like to hear from you via email. A familiar GRU cyber unit returns to make its presence felt in the war. Researchers at Microsoft report that Sandworm, the GRU threat actor the company tracks as Iridium, has deployed a new strain of ransomware, Prestige, against targets in Poland and Ukraine. Prestige announced itself on October 11th in a series of coordinated attacks against targets in the transportation and related logistics sectors. Microsoft writes, "The Prestige campaign may highlight a measured shift in Iridium's destructive attack calculus, signaling increased risk to organizations directly supplying or transporting humanitarian or military assistance to Ukraine. More broadly, it may represent an increased risk to organizations in Eastern Europe that may be considered by the Russian state to be providing support relating to the war." The attacks show a renewed willingness on the part of a Russian intelligence service to attempt disruption in addition to collection. Ransomware as a tactic is well adapted to do both. The Washington Post quotes Mandiant researchers who see this approach as an attempt by the GRU to have its cake and eat it too. Mandiant senior analyst John Wolfram told the Post, "What that shows us is that the GRU was able to maintain access to a network of their specific choosing, launch an attack and have an effect on that network, maintain that access despite the wiper operation, and launch another wiper operation at a moment of their choosing." Russia had used wipers with some success early in the war, but those attacks soon ebbed. They seem not to be returning. It's not just the Russian intelligence services who are getting back into the wiper business. Auxiliaries also appear to be mounting wiper campaigns against Ukrainian targets. CERT UA reports new activity on the part of the group it tracks as UAC 0118, a Russian cyber auxiliary that styles itself either From Russia with Love or the Z Team. The initial attack spoofed the website of Famatech's legitimate advanced IP scanner, and the malicious site offered a free download button. Pressing that button, HelpNet Security says, directs the victim to a Dropbox account that hosts a version of the Vidal information stealer, misrepresented as Advanced IP Scanner. The final stage of the attack deploys a recently developed version of Somnia ransomware. Bleeping Computer reports that the Z team hasn't demanded ransom from its victims and indeed boasts that they've removed the possibility of decryption. So, this series of Somnia infestations should be regarded as a wiper attack. CertUA observes that Z-Team used other resources obtained in the criminal-to-criminal market, notably the services of at least one unnamed initial access broker, and so the connection between cyber warfare and the criminal underground continues. TrustWave's Spider Labs has published an account of how Ukraine's IT army developed from an ad hoc group of hackers into an auxiliary cyber force aligned with the country's military objectives. Their preferred tactic has been DDoS, an attack technique that lends itself to automation and employment by a range of collaborating attackers. TrustWave writes, according to the information provided on the IT Army of Ukraine's official website, the group has now become a well-organized operation with a coordinated team. So, auxiliaries seem to have found a role on both sides in the present hybrid war. And finally, the hoods who hit Medibank with a ransomware attack are preparing to up the ante by releasing more stolen information, but the police may be getting closer to them. According to TechCrunch, the Australian Federal Police say they know the individuals responsible for the ransomware attack and consequent data breach at Medibank. The AFP hasn't publicly named them, but it has said they're criminals located in and operating from Russia. Other reports have associated the threat actors with the allegedly defunct R-Evil criminal organization. AFP Commissioner Reese Kershaw had a message for the criminals, stating, "We know who you are, and moreover, the AFP has some significant runs on the scoreboard when it comes to bringing overseas offenders back to Australia to face the justice system." For its part, the Russian embassy in Canberra expressed disappointment that the Australians haven't asked for the help of the Russian authorities. The embassy said Friday, "For some reason, this announcement was made before the AFP even contacted the Russian side through the existing professional channels of communications. We encourage the AFP to duly get in touch with the respective Russian law enforcement agencies." Coming up after the break, Malek Ben Salem from Accenture has thoughts on future-proofing cloud security, and Rick Howard previews the latest CSO Perspectives show. Stick around.
Hey everyone, it's me, Simone Biles. As a world champion gymnast and a former foster kid, I've faced my fair share of complexity, and I've learned that the concept of controlling complexity is about more than just overcoming our own hardships. It's about helping others overcome theirs too. After all, in the face of enormous complexity, the best not only find a way to adapt to the challenge, they also find a way to give back. From now until the end of the year, Axonius will make a donation to Friends of the Children for every demo completed. For more details and to sign up, go to axonius.com/friends. That's AXONIUS.com/friends.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Staying one step ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape requires a constant flow of daily intelligence. To stay up to date on everything happening in the world of cybersecurity, join over 50,000 other security professionals who subscribe to the Cyber Daily. With daily email updates on the latest cybersecurity news, top threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more, the Cyber Daily is the first thing security professionals check every morning. To learn more and subscribe for free, go to recordedfuture.com/cyber-daily. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Rick Howard. He is the CyberWire's Chief Security Officer and also our Chief Analyst. Rick, always great to welcome you back.
Hey, Dave.
So on this week's CSO Perspectives show over on the subscription side of the CyberWire, you have got what I can only describe as a pretty big get in terms of an interview. Who's coming on the show?
Andre Duran is the CEO of Ping Identity, and his company is routinely grouped together as one of the leaders in the identity and access management space, along with other companies like Okta, Microsoft, Oracle, and IBM. But what's interesting is that he's been running Ping Identity for over 20 years, which, as you know, is not normal in a Silicon Valley company.
No, I think just recently I was reading that I think average tenure for folks like this is around 5 years.
It's exactly right. So after 20 years, Mr. Duran is somewhat of a unicorn, so it's just for that, it's interesting to talk to him. And as you can imagine, he has some thoughts about the direction that identity and access management is going in the next 5 years or so.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but my sense is that I don't feel like there's been a whole lot of groundbreaking innovation in this space for the past decade or so. I mean, I guess we've got things like Face ID and Touch ID, but we're still rolling along with usernames and passwords.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And we talked about that in the interview. And the way he describes it is that the identity and access management space has been slowly and steadily building the infrastructure for major change, kind of gaining gravity, you might say. And he says that at a certain point, likely within the next 5 years or so, it will reach a tipping point that will fundamentally shift how we do all this stuff. So it's pretty exciting.
All right, I'll look forward to that. So that is over on the pro side. What episode are you publishing over on the public side?
Yeah, for just over a year now, we've been publishing old episodes of CSO Perspectives in a public feed with ads. It's called CSO Perspectives Public. So if our listeners hate ads as much as I do, they should go subscribe right now to the CyberWire Pro and to get all of our content, not just my shows, all of the shows ad-free, right? So we published this episode in February of this year on software supply chains.
Okay, so back then we were all a bit on our heels from the Log4j situation, still in the midst of all that. So software supply chains, that adds up.
We do a little history here of software supply chain problems. Log4j was not the first time the problem is surfaced, as you remember. And we pinpointed the exact moment when the software supply chain became a thing that we all need to consider in our InfoSec programs. And then we discussed strategies like zero trust and tactics like SBOMs, software bill of materials, that will reduce the probability of material impact due to some Log4j type issues in the future.
Well, before I let you go, what is the phrase of the week over on the Word Notes podcast?
This week we're talking about pretexting. It's a great word, right? It's the bad guy art of concocting a believable story that will convince the victim, you, Dave, to give up something valuable.
All right. Yes, I'm an easy mark. People see me coming and they say, that guy, that's the guy. He's our guy.
Yeah, they don't have to concoct too much to get you, I guess, is what we're saying.
No. They just say, I don't know, free Star Wars stuff. And I'm like, it's all it takes. Yeah. All right. Well, Rick Howard, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Malek Ben Salem. She is the Security Innovation Principal Director at Accenture. Malek, always great to welcome you back to the show. I want to touch base with you today on cloud security and some things that you're looking at when it comes to future-proofing it. What can you share with us today?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So the race to cloud is well underway, and it has been accelerated by the pandemic. Many organizations who were reluctant about moving to the cloud has made their decision under the pressure of people working remotely and under the needs of having flexible, scalable networks. So it was an easy decision at that point. Other companies were driven by opportunities to drive innovation. Others were looking for, fulfilling the bigger picture of their digital transformation. But along those lines, as Accenture, as we see our clients making their decisions to move to the cloud, we see basically two routes that clients can take. The first is basically the direct route, where if you will, you drive and learn. And typically in this cloud journey, clients move to a primary cloud provider, and then their security focus is different than the second cloud journey, which is more of we call it the scenic route, which is more intense and intentional, where the client may decide to go to a hybrid model or to a multi-cloud environment. And this journey is more complex, but it can be longer term, and it can provide longer term resilience. In these journeys, if we think of cloud as, or if you think of the cloud continuum from cloud all the way to edge and everything in between, if we think of that as the map, then what we want is to have security as the compass and have security guide us through this map, through our journey to the cloud. Now, that's not always easy. There are hurdles, especially with respect to the existing security teams that our clients have. One thing we see is that security teams are hampered by the existing culture. For instance, as network security adopts a zero trust approach, that's a pivot from direct control to a shared responsibility model. And that's not what security teams are used to, right? Security personnel is typically used to controlling the perimeter, to limit access or who has access to technology. They're not used to this adaptive, zero trust-based approach. So that would require a security culture shift within the organization. Another thing that we see as an obstacle is the scarcity of skills. So typically, existing security teams are, security administrators. They're dealing with securing infrastructure, managing vulnerabilities. They have network security skills, maybe cyber defense teams. But in a cloud environment, there's more need for, let's say, developers who can work on identity and access management, for instance. So it's a different set of skills that would be required. That's a combination of security and development skills. And then the third challenge we see is, this software automation advances are outpacing security. There are numerous tools that can help with, developing code quickly. We have low-code, no-code platforms that are helping developers produce even more, or even average developers, average citizen developers, produce more code. But we don't have that automation on the security side. And so we need to develop more automated tools. We need ways to automate security so that we can keep up with the pace of software automation.
Getting back to what you said about, taking the direct route or the scenic route, to what degree do you recommend one or the other? I mean, is it different for each organization based on their history and what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think there are a number of factors that can influence that choice. One of them is industry specific. Some industries may be more likely of taking one route versus the other. For instance, in the banking industry, moved to a secure cloud, but their driver or the issues they've encountered were more regulatory and compliance related. So that could have driven the route they've taken versus, other industries who are much more focused perhaps on innovation, or maybe clients who have certain customer engagement models may consider a different route. So let's say if you are engaging directly with customers through a digital platform. So if you are a client engaging directly with customers through a digital platform like Uber or Airbnb, that carries different risks than managing numerous suppliers or payment processes in a business-to-business context. And so that may dictate which route you want to take. So another factor might be location. Your geographic footprint can influence which route you may want to take. For instance, you may be required to use a sovereign cloud, or you may be required to use just one cloud as opposed to having a hybrid cloud model. So all of those factors do really influence which route or which journey is best suited for these clients.
All right. Well, interesting insights. Malek Ben Salem, thanks for joining us. Developers are responsible for more than ever these days, not just the code they write, but also the containers and cloud infrastructure their apps run on, and the need to do it all without slowing down. That's where Snyk comes in. Snyk is a frictionless security platform that meets developers where they are, finding and fixing vulnerabilities right from the CLI, IDEs, repos, and pipelines. And Snyk integrates seamlessly with AWS offerings like Code Pipeline, EKS, ECR, and more. Deploy on AWS, secure with Snyk. Learn more at snyk.co/cyberwire. That's snyk.co/cyberwire. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Don't forget to check out the Grumpy Old Geeks podcast, where I contribute to a regular segment called Security. I join Jason and Brian on their show for a lively discussion of the latest security news every week. You can find Grumpy Old Geeks where all the fine podcasts are listed. The CyberWire podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfand, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Maria Vermatzis, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Catherine Murphy, Janine Daly, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, Simone Petrella, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Never miss a thing with CyberWire Pro. Stay cyber aware by getting access to all our public podcasts, ad-free, as well as our exclusive CyberWire Pro podcasts, briefing, articles, and events by becoming a CyberWire Pro subscriber. Get actionable reporting, analysis, and insights on global events occurring in the cybersecurity industry at your fingertips. Visit thecyberwire.com/pro to subscribe today.